The 76ers have found themselves in a really unique spot. Between the injuries, the overwhelming amount of question marks, yet sneakily talented young roster, depending on who you ask, you might get a completely different opinion. So what can we expect from them in 2026? Are they good enough to compete in the East? And what can we make of their future? At this point, I'm not even sure if injury luck begins to describe what's happened to the Sixers. Joel Embiid suffered a major knee injury early in 2024, and after surgery, he rushed back in time for the playoffs, then spent the summer with USA at the Olympics. It wasn't until last season was approaching that he really started to rehab. Then, after a late debut, it was immediately obvious that he wasn't ready. Throughout the first few months of the season, he battled a few injuries, ranging everywhere from his foot to his knee to his face, and in February, the medical staff finally shut him down, having only played 19 games as a shell of himself. The silver lining, though, was that in the midst of Joel's problems, their 2024 draft was an immediate success, as 16th overall pick Jared McCain showcased a level of outside shooting, decision-making, and overall feel for the game that you don't really see in rookies. Well, that didn't even last 2 months before he suffered a season-ending meniscus tear. That left Tyrese Maxey to run the show, but he missed 30 games, and the newly acquired Paul George missed 41 games himself, so Philly's core was nothing short of broken. That's why they had a bottom 10 offense and a bottom 5 defense, won just 24 games, and essentially just tossed their season into the void. Outside of McCain's breakout, really, there were only 2 positives for Philly. One was that they traded for Quentin Grimes mid-season, who immediately broke out when given the keys to the offense, finishing the season with an efficient average of 22 points a game. The second positive was that all of that losing landed them the 3rd pick, where they selected VJ Edgecombe. What if I told you that you could have the convenience of fast food and the taste of home cooking in one fresh meal? If you're like me and don't always have time to cook for yourself, Factor meals are perfect for you. It's as simple as unboxing, heating it up, and in a matter of 2 minutes, you'll have a fully prepared meal on the table. My personal favorite is the truffle butter filet mignon with a side of potato leek mash and roasted carrots. Not just because it's delicious, but because it's high in protein and fits my goals in the gym. There's so much variety though, and you not only have the freedom to choose, you have the freedom to customize. Maybe you want a chicken breast. Maybe you're looking for a calorie smart meal. Maybe you're vegan. No matter who you are, Factor makes it so easy to eat clean, and that's why I'm excited to bring you guys a special offer. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code HoopVenueFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. You heard that right. That's code HoopVenueFB50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for an entire year. The thing about the Sixers team is that everything rides on whether or not Joel Embiid's going to be healthy. We've seen time and time again that when he's on the court, they're a top-tier team. Over the last 5 seasons, they've won 68% of their games with him, on pace for about 56 wins. And they've won just 38% of their games without him, on pace for 31. That's a 25-win disparity, and it's because he does so much for them on both ends of the floor. Not only do they rely on him to be their primary scorer, he's the primary creator, the primary pick and roll defender, the primary rim protector, and everything just sort of falls apart when he's not at least close to peak form. The first portion of the 2024 season was the best we'd ever seen him. Through his first 33 games, he was averaging 36 points on 65% true shooting, reaching untouched air as a scorer. He led the Sixers to a record of 26-7, which was actually first over even the eventual champion Celtics, while Philly had both a top 3 offense and defense. This was truly one of the most dominant individual campaigns we'd ever seen, but unfortunately it got cut short by a knee injury. And since the injury, he's never quite moved in the same way. In the 19 games he played, he wasn't even a fraction of himself. His scoring dropped by 11 points, his rebounds and assists were down, he was blocking less shots, so they only went 8-11 instead of the usual 50 or 60 win pace. Again, I'll reiterate, literally everything rides on Joel Embiid being Joel Embiid. If he's 70 or 80% of peak form, they'll be competing for a top 3 seed in the East. If he's 40 or 50%, they'll be fighting to stay out of the play-in, and if he's too hurt to show up, they might not even be a playoff team. With that said though, it doesn't mean there isn't plenty to like with the way this roster's been built out. Tyrese Maxey has emerged into a really high-level offensive number 2. Between his speed and slashing ability, the long-range shooting, and the way he can play with or without the ball, if you put him in a competitive environment with other talented players, he's the type of guy who can really move the needle. And there's still room for growth. He's added some strength, gotten more comfortable playing through contact, and he's even improved his in-between game a little bit. However, he's a solid, not great passer and isn't some uber efficient on-ball scorer, so he's not necessarily the type of guy you can structure an entire offense around and get the best results for everyone, which is probably Philly's biggest issue right now. Paul George is another go-to scorer for the team, and he's coming off a big down year. Some of that is age and injuries, but some of it is also a miscast role due to the rest of the team. At this point, he just doesn't have the burst to get around defenders, so he's not really getting to the rim or the line, and he too is a limited passer. So when the ball is in his hands as a lead creator, your offense is essentially living on a diet of tough pull-up jumpers. Not that he can't make those shots, he's just simply a lot better at the other ones. Over the last 3 seasons, he's made 35% of his pull-up threes, good for the 73rd percentile, and he's made almost 42% of his catch-and-shoot threes, good for the 89th percentile. Also, less on-ball responsibility means more energy on defense. He's not chasing guys or hounding the ball at the point of attack like he used to, but he's still one of the best off-ball defensive wings in the league. Between his length, instincts, and active hands, he can still be a big-time playmaker. He's another year older and suffered even more injuries. I think at this point, he'd ideally be a number 3 or number 4 on offense who can give you 20 in spurts, but is primarily on the floor to offer spacing, defensive versatility, and some creation to take the pressure off of the main guys. In order to maximize PG in that role, we'll have to see even more from Jared McCain. As a rookie, he was already a world-class off-ball mover. Timely cuts, relocations, good positioning, just always in the right spot at the right time. He paired that with incredible outside shooting, instant decision making, and a really nice in-between game to just torch defenses as an off-ball weapon. The question is how much juice he has as an on-ball creator. There were some nice pick and roll reps. He's pretty decent at using a live dribble to get to different spots on the court, but he's not a huge athlete, not an elite passer, and again, it sort of feels like they're missing that presence. Let's take a step back for a second and think about the trio I just talked about. Maxey's an elite slasher and outside shooter. McCain's an elite off-ball player and outside shooter. George is an elite off-ball shooter who can create his own shot in spurts. The spacing, versatility, and shot making of that trio could yield a really good offense on their own. With a true lead presence, everything would come together perfectly. And that takes me back to Joel Embiid, because if he somehow finds a way to get back to peak form, I think we could be looking at the league's best regular season offense. If that's your core 4 though, who's the 5th man? Because what we haven't addressed is 2 key issues. None of those guys are great on-ball defenders, while the backcourt could even be considered weak links. Quentin Grimes is a solid point of attack defender with the agility, length, and technique to pressure the ball or fight through screens. He's not very big though, and he's at his best against guards, so with Maxey and McCain, that's a really undersized front line. For more size and resistance against bigger creators or wings, they could go to Kelly Oubre. He doesn't offer the same type of pressure that Grimes does, but he can still hound the ball with his length, has really good hands, and can help away from the ball, either in passing lanes or as a third rim protector. And I think that's the direction they ultimately go in, although that sort of caps the offensive potential because while he's an athletic above the rim finisher, he can't really space the floor, isn't a good passer, and doesn't really create anything for himself. That's why I think they're hoping VJ Edgecombe can be the best of both worlds. Like Grimes, he's a bit undersized at the 3, but makes up for it with freak explosive athleticism. He projects to be a high-level defender at the next level between his athletic tools, instincts, and high motor. On offense, he's raw and lacks a jumper, but the explosive athleticism would just pop next to high-end talent, bringing consistent rim pressure, strong finishing, and solid passing. So I do think an ideal version of the 76ers would be able to slide him in as a sort of missing piece. Remember though, perimeter defense was one of only 2 key issues I brought up. The other is passing, and I think that's a problem they'd really run into in the playoffs. Not only do they lack a truly elite passer, they don't have any great connective passers, and against an elite playoff defense, I think they'd struggle to break down those more aggressive coverages. Just look at the depth chart. Unless they're planning to give Lowry big minutes, you could make a legitimate argument that Andre Drummond or Trendon Watford is the best passer off the bench right now. All that's to say, there's a lot to like with this Sixers team, but there's also a lot to question. The overall offensive talent is insane, and they've got a nice surplus of interior defenders as long as Embiid is healthy. But will he be healthy? And even if he is, the passing, on-ball defense, and defensive versatility all lack behind what you'd expect from a championship team. If everything goes right, they could win 54 games, but I could just as easily see them winning 32. I think they'll land somewhere in the middle, in that mid to low 40s range, and make it into the playoffs, although I don't think they're a serious threat to make the NBA Finals, unless, once again, there's a Joel Embiid miracle. Speaking of which, I'm not sure what to expect on that front. He's back on the court working out without a knee brace, which could be a great sign, but we still don't even know whether or not he'll be back for the start of the season, or if he'll be moving anywhere close to how he was moving before the injury. If Embiid's out though, I think a silver lining is that the Sixers do still have a more than salvageable future. Beyond the fact that Maxey, Grimes, McCain, and Edgecombe are all 25 or younger, rookie Justin Edwards showcased quite a bit as a big, athletic, versatile defensive wing who can hit the outside shot, and the same goes for Adem Bona, who already looked like a high-level rim protector and interior finisher the moment he stepped on an NBA court. So they've done a pretty good job of building out two timelines. Can they compete now? If everything goes right. But they can do so while still having a lot to look forward to and a super interesting combination of young talent. In simpler terms, it's about to be 2026, and the process still isn't completely dead.